You're listening to Law and Order: Criminal Justice System, a production of Wolf Entertainment and iHeart Podcasts.
In the criminal justice system, landmark trials transcend the courtroom to reshape the law. The brave men and women who investigate and prosecute these cases are part of a select group that has defined American history. These are their stories. November 30th, 1994, Williamsburg Social Club, Brooklyn, New York.
It's a scene right out of the movies. Cigar smoke hung thick in the air as a group of men faced off in a card game.
It was late in the evening. They were playing an Italian card game called Continental.
The stakes were high, and tensions over one man's growing debts were even higher. One man calls someone's bluff. Another pulls a gun. And when the smoke cleared, two men lay bleeding across the card table. One shot multiple times in the back, another once in the head. The other players cleared out ahead of the approaching sirens. If police were looking for answers, it wouldn't come from them.
Everybody knew there was a lot more to it than just some guy got shot in a social club.
The San Giuseppe Social Club was a wise guy favorite, and the double murder had all the markings of a mob hit, except for one major difference. One of the men had survived his wounds.
The gun was so close to D'Urso's head that the speed of the bullet, as soon as it hit the skull, it came down his neck. So he wasn't dead, but he was knocked out. They thought he was dead.
And over the next several years, that survivor of a point-blank gunshot would plot a unique kind of revenge as a secret weapon in the government's fight against organized crime, and just might be the final nail in the coffin for a generation of mob bosses.
You're not with the mob because you want to be. It's the gangster that decides whether you're his associate or not.
If you like your life, you will vote to acquit.
I'm Anna-Siga Nicolazzi.
My father should have been a dead man.
From Wolf Entertainment and iHeart Podcasts, this is Law and Order: Criminal Justice System. In the years following the commission trial, the New York mob was like a wounded animal, struggling but still dangerous, maybe more than ever. Especially when a man like Vincent Gigante could run his Genovese gang from prison, and an army of made men were getting wise on how to avoid prosecution. By the mid-1990s, the five families had taken significant blows to their respective leaderships. But these were organizations that had survived crackdowns, mass indictments, and even all-out wars. Exterminating the mafia from every corner of the criminal underground would not happen overnight. After all, there were still plenty of up-and-comers ready to step into vacant leadership roles and willing to unleash an unprecedented wave of violence to secure their newfound power.
My name is Christopher Blank. I was a member of the Brooklyn DA's office from 1984 to 2023. I went from a line assistant to an executive ADA in charge of organized crime investigations and grand jury presentations and trials. I just started in this work when Castellano got killed outside of Sparks.
With his resume, Chris Blank is the kind of lawyer who could probably walk into most law firms in the country and write his own ticket. But for this recently retired prosecutor, serving his community, in this case the people of New York, was his higher calling, especially when it came to prosecuting organized crime.
Being a lawyer was never about making more money than the next guy to me. It was more about the opportunity to do the right thing. And being a prosecutor in these kinds of cases was to me the epitome of that kind of practice.
During his career, he also learned that it can feel like a never-ending battle against an enemy so skilled at self-preservation.
This applies across the board to all sophisticated criminals who are running corrupt criminal organizations, whether they're Russian, Chinese, or Eastern European. or even street crime gangs that are becoming more sophisticated, they have developed a layering system, a hierarchy system that insulates the bosses from ever being prosecuted because they're never the ones out on the street on the front line exposing themselves to law enforcement.
And the shooting at the Williamsburg Social Club was a unique opportunity to examine this hierarchy up close and ultimately exploit its weaknesses.
The social club was the actual social club that Sonny Black and Donnie Brasco had their interactions in.
Donnie Brasco was the name used by undercover FBI agent Joe Pistone, who infiltrated the Bonanno crime family from 1976 to 1981, resulting in over 200 indictments, 100 convictions, and one great movie. The club was already on law enforcement's radar as a mobster hangout. But by 1994, after the commission trial, many were keeping a much lower profile than their predecessors. And congregating in clubs easily targeted by the feds was not any mobster's idea of a good time.
It had now become a local, non-organized crime-oriented Italian social club where Italian guys from the neighborhood in Williamsburg got together to play cards and have family events that wasn't available to them in their apartments and their homes.
Which is not to say that the violence that erupted in the early hours of that November day was unknown to the neighborhood, which had long been a stronghold of the Genovese crime family. But it was a reminder that the specter of the mob had far from vanished from the everyday life of ordinary citizens. Inside the club, the first officers to arrive took in the crime scene. One man was dead on the floor, shot multiple times in the back. The other had a bullet wound to the back of his head, but incredibly, he was still breathing. Paramedics removed both victims from the scene, one to the hospital and one to the morgue. Witnesses were scarce, at least ones that were willing to talk to police. Cards and chips were scattered on the floor, so detectives assumed a disagreement over the card game turned violent. But given the club's history and reputation, they also had to consider the possibility that this was a hit. The first step would be identifying the victims. The man in the hospital who survived a bullet to the head was Michael Cookie Durso, and the man in the morgue was his cousin. Here's Special Agent Mike Campy, a New York native who became one of the FBI's experts on the inner workings of the five families.
Michael Durso grew up in Brooklyn, the Greenpoint section of Brooklyn. His first cousin was Tino Lombardi. And Tino Lombardi worked at Ruggiero's restaurant. Eventually, Durso worked at the restaurant.
As Chris Blank tells it, Durso saw Lombardi as more like a brother.
He adored his cousin. They were a team, and they were as close as cousins could be.
But to detectives' surprise, despite their thick files on known mob members, neither Durso or Lombardi showed up on any of the org charts of the five families, which, according to Campy, is not to say that they didn't dabble in the life.
Growing up in the neighborhood, Durso was a tough kid. He could bench over 400 pounds. He was on steroids. He did some time in prison for a check cashing scheme. I believe he was on the news as Genovese because they would sort of engage the tellers into conversation as they were banging out bad checks.
So he's basically flirting to get over to commit the crimes?
Yeah.
That is one I had not heard before.
And they called him Genovese, him and his cousin.
Eventually, the two Genoveses graduated from small-time grifts to loan sharking, bookmaking, and running illegal after-hours card games, all of which required an intimidating physical presence, which Durso had in spades, and the tacit approval of the local crime family, who would never let a good profit go unnoticed without getting their cut.
Durso, who was nicknamed Cookie, was very smart, and Lombardi was smart, and were connected to old-time Genovese guys from Manhattan, Sammy Aparo and Joe Zito.
So Durso and his cousin were promising up-and-coming gangsters with well-connected friends, but they were not made men. They weren't officially part of the family. Now, over the course of the last 8 episodes, we've talked about bosses, underbosses, capos, and soldiers. But there's another important cog in the wheel of organized crime: the associates. Associates have a wholly unequal partnership with sworn members of a crime family. They may be partners in a criminal scheme or racket, maybe even friends, like in the case of associate Pete Savino and Vincent Gigante. But unlike made men, associates do not benefit from the family's profit sharing or their protection. In fact, some associates may even have more in common with the victims of the mob than with the mobsters themselves, because often their partnerships with the crime family are not of their own choice.
When you're hanging out with people affiliated with organized crime and they love showing money, they want to pick up the tab, they want to pay for things, that is the process of facilitating an association with you. At some point in time, they're going to tell you that you're with them. All of a sudden, you become a victim of extortion. And you don't have a choice, because over time, the implied threat is your family's in jeopardy. See, that's the thing about associates I try to explain. It's the mobster's choice. You're not with the mob because you want to be. It's the gangster that decides whether you're his associate or not.
Associates like D'Urso and Lombardi aspire to be made men, equals with the ones extorting them. But in reality, they were pawns in a larger game, interchangeable and, if necessary, disposable.
One of the recordings I made that demonstrates the hypocrisy of the life was with Jackie DeRoss. Jackie DeRoss was an acting boss of the Colombo family. And we made a recording where DeRoss identified associates as suckers. They think they're in the life, but we just use them. I believe that's almost a verbatim quote.
Ambitious associates were lured in with promises of profit, protection, and the prestige of becoming made down the road, but their existence was often much bleaker.
There's so few associates that end up becoming inducted into a family. And it's because you need these other supporting cast members to generate cash for the family, but they're used.
Which brings us back to the night at the social club in Brooklyn, where D'Urso and Lombardi ran their regular card game.
They were good up-and-coming associates of organized crime, learning from their mentors and getting into their own little loan sharking activity and paying tribute, and eventually getting into bookmaking. So they were on the rise.
As you can imagine, gambling was also a great way to create repeat business. And two of their best customers just happened to be mobsters.
D'Urso and Lombardi have a social club in Brooklyn, and Carmine Polito, Mario Fortunato, and others would gamble at this club, card games.
Polito and Fortunato were not as highly respected, although they were also anxious to be thought of as tough guys in the neighborhood.
Carmine Polito was also a chronically unlucky gambler, and he was up to his eyeballs in debt to D'Urso and Lombardi, a predicament that might get a man in serious trouble, but being a mobster kept him in the game, and presumably out of the hospital. But Polito resented being in hock, and so he concocted a scheme to clear his debts. The plan? To ambush D'Urso and Lombardi during a card game. Robbing the pot might even put cops off the scent, while netting Polito a few bucks to feed his gambling habit. And because their targets were associates, they didn't need permission from the boss, nor would they likely face a serious reprimand. But as they would soon find out, the hit would still have major consequences. Here's Chris Blank and Mike Campy on how it all went down.
Sally Lombardi and D'Urso, who were cousins and were very tight, were in the club, and Mario Fortunato and Carmine Polito were in the club. Mario, his brothers run the Fortunato Bakery, which is a very famous bakery on Manhattan Avenue, not too far away from the social club. They were playing an Italian card game called Continental. Time went on, and kids from the neighborhood came by. Their reason for coming in the club was to shoot and kill both D'Urso and Lombardi. Those two guys were Anthony Cerasulo and Anthony Bruno.
Because D'Urso was so muscular and had a tendency of violence, they shot him in the back of the head first.
Lombardi was shot several times and he was killed. Cerasulo and Bruno ran away, and Fortunato and Polito both ran away, so leaving D'Urso down on the floor, shot in the back of the head, and Lombardi also down on the floor, dead.
In the ensuing investigation, local police failed to gather much information.
Nobody was willing to tell the full story of what went down. They were trying to piece it together, and I'm sure they were shaking the trees with their informants in the area, trying to get answers. And they might have had a thumbnail sketch of what they thought might have happened, but not enough to bring to a prosecutor.
And their best witness, D'Urso, even after recovering from his injuries, was still playing good soldier and refused to talk to police.
The tradition in this case was you don't talk to anybody. I think D'Urso felt that he would be able to get satisfaction by bringing his case that Fortunato and Polito should have to answer for this shooting.
In other words, D'Urso thought he could get his justice straight from the Genovese bosses, for whom he had been a loyal earner for years.
D'Urso was out running his organized crime life and trying to get satisfaction from the Genovese crime family when he came to realize that Polito and Fortunato were backed by a different capo, and he was a powerful Genovese guy and continued to be a powerful guy till the end of his life.
And so his demands for retribution fell on deaf ears. D'Urso, not being a made member of the mob, didn't benefit from the same oaths of protection or revenge. Despite the indignity of that slight, D'Urso was willing to stay loyal and stay quiet about who killed his cousin and left a bullet in his skull. But soon his loyalty would be tested again, this time thanks to a dispute with a made man. Here again is Mike Campy.
D'Urso had bettors, gamblers, that bet at an office. And the guy that took the bets was, I'm not making this up, it's hilarious, was a guy named Johnny Zero. Apparently Zero realizes some of D'Urso's bettors that bet pretty big consistently lost. So he decides one day to set the bets aside rather than record them and keep the money for himself. Well, the bettors hit, I think it was about $30,000 or something like that, 40, and Zero doubled down. So he did the same thing again. Now it was like 70, 80,000. And when D'Urso came, he explained it, and that facilitated a call to Zero's boss.
D'Urso demanded that Zero's boss make good on what he was owed.
He gets a call from an unknown male, and the unknown male describes how you can't touch my guy. Don't ever touch my guy. Now, he doesn't identify himself, and D'Urso finds it insulting. He goes back to the office, calls the unknown male up on the phone, and basically, in a vulgar, disrespectful manner, says, I can't beat your guy. And he proceeds to give Johnny Zero a beating. So D'Urso basically hangs up on this guy because he felt that he was disrespected.
The confrontation earned D'Urso a quick reprimand from a portly Genovese capo known as Sammy Meatballs.
He gets a call from Sammy Meatballs, directing him to come down immediately to meet with him. He goes down to see Sammy in Little Italy, and Sammy describes how Frank Farby Serpico is the current acting boss of the Genovese family. Nobody in the Genovese family really knows but a select few. And apparently D'Urso insulted Farby on the phone. It was Farby that was on the phone calling D'Urso. And Farby wants to kill D'Urso.
D'Urso had been in the dark that the guy on the other end of the phone was the acting Genovese boss. He had already survived one hit. He found himself again on the Genovese most wanted list.
That was the second thing that rubbed D'Urso the wrong way. It really infuriated him that he couldn't retaliate on his shooting and his cousin's murder, and now you've got the acting boss of the Genovese family who wants to kill him.
But his new Genovese enemies had underestimated the associate, because if D'Urso couldn't get justice their way, he would get it another.
That was kind of the last straw for D'Urso. He's like, I've done all these things. I've made all this money for them. I've stayed quiet even though I've been shot in the head and my close cousin has been murdered. They've done nothing to help get to the bottom of this or exact retribution for this on my behalf. And now they want to kill me. So I'm done. So he literally, on his own initiative, contacted the FBI, came in, and agreed to wear a body wire.
After years of trying to earn his way into the fold of the Genovese crime family, Durso decided to swap sides. Armed with a wire hidden inside an FBI customized Rolex, Durso became an informant, swearing revenge on the men that killed his cousin. But to get the goods and watch them all go down, he had to stay alive. Despite being just an associate, Michael Cookie Durso had been a strong and loyal earner for the Genovese. But after the attempt on his life, he knew exactly where he stood in the mob pecking order. Here again is former Brooklyn prosecutor Chris Blank.
Durso was smart. He understood what he was doing. He knew why he wanted to be a member of organized crime. He knew the benefits and he knew the costs. He was successful at it. When this came down, he made a decision that all the things that attracted me to this are basically BS. Everybody's out for themselves. Nobody's protecting me. And I'm going to protect me and my family from these people. And I'm going to come on board. And I know what that means. That means I have to tell the full story, hold nothing back, and do whatever they ask me to do.
Durso was not held by any sworn oaths of loyalty, but he surely knew that by cooperating with the FBI, he was risking his life.
I'm sure he didn't have to wear a wire, but his level of anger at the organized crime figures who failed to support him and back him up and get retribution led him to want to go further than your average cooperator and agree to wear a wire, even though that would put his life in danger.
Mike Campy ran point on the operation.
My role in operating Durso was to generate criminal conversations involving not only the Genovese family, but others that interacted with the Genovese family.
For Durso, it would mean making nice with the very men who threatened to kill him and continuing to kick up profits to the Genovese bosses who sanctioned it. But Durso had learned a thing or two about self-preservation, and while the feds used his recordings to collect crucial information about Genovese's inner workings, Durso never lost sight of his own targets, the men who killed his cousin.
And for the next 2 years, Mike Durso was probably the most successful cooperator out in the street that the FBI ever had. And these recordings were all kept quiet until it became time for Durso to come in from the street.
As a result of Durso's cooperation, prosecutors issued dozens of indictments, including the 2 men against whom Durso had sworn revenge.
The FBI took a renewed look at what went down and decided they did have enough evidence to make a case and present it to the Eastern District and get an indictment of Fortunato and Polito.
In the subsequent murder trial of Polito and Fortunato, Durso took the stand and described Polito as a degenerate gambler who conspired to kill him and his cousin to clear his debts. But among Polito's many mistakes was leaving Durso alive. Polito and Fortunato were convicted for the murder of Tino Lombardi, but not long after, their convictions were actually reversed.
It looked like a very solid case until the Second Circuit got its hands on it and decided that the shooting here was not a violent crime in aid of racketeering, but a personal beef, and therefore didn't fit the federal statutory elements. And so they reversed the conviction, which was a shock to everybody.
Meaning the 2 men had to be tried again, but this time in state court, which is where former Brooklyn prosecutor Chris Blank entered the picture and would go on to lead the case. The case continued on its complex legal path, with a second trial, 1 acquitted and 1 convicted, and then yet another reversal. But that deep dive is a story for another day. By this time, Durso had entered witness protection, but before he disappeared, he and his Rolex had also gathered evidence implicating a very high-value target, Vincent Gigante's own son, Andrew Gigante. According to Mike Campy, a Genovese soldier named George Barone was owed some money by an associate, but was sent to prison before he could collect.
When Barone went to prison, he facilitated a relationship for Andrew Gigante with this individual, and this individual ended up, making tens of millions of dollars with regards to the seaport.
So when Barone pressed Gigante for this associate to pay his old debts, Andrew Gigante balked.
And they found it insulting that Barone was demanding this money from this associate to the point that they wanted to kill him over like a modest amount of money that was owed to George Barone, like $70,000, $80,000. I mean, Chin's kids and relatives were making $400,000, didn't have to leave their house. You couldn't give George 70 grand that he's owed? I mean, it's so stupid.
Instead, Andrew Gigante passed along the order to murder George Barone. And just to give you an idea of how deep Durso was when he was wearing that hidden wire in his Rolex, it was Durso himself that was asked to do the hit.
They were going to use Durso to kill Barone. And so at this point, it was, all right, we're ready to take it down. We've got sufficient evidence to charge Andrew Gigante, multiple players, including George Barone, who ultimately cooperated, and nobody expected Barone to cooperate. I think he realized the hypocrisy of life.
It was another win for the feds, but even more importantly, it was evidence that convicted Genovese boss Vincent the Chin Gigante was still calling the shots from prison and using his son Andrew as his intermediary on the streets. And remember, Gigante was only serving a sentence of 12 years, so prosecutors had every reason to try and find ways to keep him in jail. Implicating him in a conspiracy with his son was a good place to start. Here's his daughter, Rita Gigante.
They needed something to keep him there, otherwise he was getting out.
And according to investigators, he was staying busy in prison, using his sons to relay his orders to the rest of the family.
They were not made men. I won't even say that they worked for him. I would say that they were just involved by being the extension of his children. And if he said to them, go do this, go talk to this one, go talk to that one, they would go. Never an order to do anything, drastic like kill someone. My father would never allow for that.
Vincent Chin Gigante, he did not induct his sons because he did not want law enforcement scrutiny on them based on that title of being a member, a capo. On a level, it was very cautious, and I think right.
But whatever cover Gigante thought he had provided his sons, Andrew's involvement as intermediary provided a crucial point of leverage against the Genovese boss. Using the Durso wires, the government decided to build an obstruction case against Andrew Gigante and set about proving once and for all that Vincent Gigante was still the man in control.
I just figured, let me get the prison calls and I'll show he's running the show.
And it would be one of those very phone calls on a very fateful day that would give the government an unexpected assist. September 11th, 2001.
We were in the kitchen, my sisters were with me, and I said to my mom, what movie are you watching? Because I saw the first tower go down. And she goes, what are you talking about? I'm watching the news. And then all of a sudden I turned it up and everybody realized what was happening. Within 10 minutes after that phone rang and he's on the other end, like a nervous wreck, like, are the kids okay? Is anybody in the city right now? Because, he wanted to be reassured. So he was on the phone for a while. And he's talking completely normal with my mother, and they were talking like a conversation, like me and you were talking. And that was it. That's how it all came down.
When we got the prison calls, it was Chin calling his family on 9/11 to ask if everybody was okay. And so it was like, let's charge him with obstruction.
Remember, Gigante was still claiming he was too mentally unfit to be a criminal mastermind, but the call to his family blew the charade. Here's prosecutor Andrew Weissman, the man who had first convinced a judge in 1997 that Gigante was competent to stand trial.
We ended up bringing a second charge against Gigante for obstruction for lying to the court repeatedly about his mental condition, and he ended up pleading guilty to that. Part of the reason he was charged was prosecutors take really seriously lying to prosecutors, lying to FBI agents, lying to the court, obstruction of court processes, because that's our lifeblood, how we build cases. It acts to give a deterrent to those people who think they can sort of hop on the stand or come in and meet with you and lie without any sort of risk. The second reason is because the sentence was really not appropriate.
They basically told him, we have you on tape, you're completely normal, your whole family is talking to you like you're normal, so we're going to go after them for obstruction of justice if you don't say exactly who you are and what you've done.
And this time, the government held the ultimate upper hand.
Once they told him he was coming after the family for obstruction of justice, he just admitted everything at that point, and that was it. Everything ended. It was like, okay, whatever you just want. And he gave them all the information that they wanted, and that's how it all came about.
In the end, Vincent Gigante put his blood family in front of his crime family. He agreed to plead guilty to obstruction charges, a plea deal that would spare his wife and daughter from prosecution. But his son Andrew, who Gigante had tried so hard to protect, would have to face the music. Here's Mike Campy.
I charged Andrew Gigante, and I was at the arrest of Andrew Gigante at his house. And I remember how the jury box was filled with press to watch his statement and then watch Andrew and Chin plead guilty together that day.
It was an unprecedented capitulation by a mafia boss.
It was like Chin basically acknowledging in a single word answers to the judge that he faked his crazy act for decades. And then he asked if he and the son could meet each other because they may not see each other again. They're going to different prisons. And so the judge allowed it, and they met in the hallway after.
What was said between them was never recorded, but it would be the last in-person meeting of father and son. On July 25, 2003, Gigante's son Andrew was sentenced to 2 years in prison and fined $2.5 million for racketeering and extortion. Vincent Gigante was sentenced to an additional 3 years. 2 years later, at the age of 77, he died in a Springfield, Missouri prison hospital.
I was in my office, it was after hours, and I got the phone call. And it was my sister who called me and told me. And I dropped the phone, just couldn't believe it. And I hear my mother hysterical in the background. And I just said to her, get off the phone with me, I'm coming home. I was very much at peace with it because he was at peace, and I knew he didn't have his ego attached to him anymore. Was I hurt? Yes. Did I cry? Yes. But it was more about my mother than it was about anything. For me to be there for her because I knew she was going to be devastated.
In the years after her father died, Rita reflected on the kind of man he was, the pain and damage he had caused, and her own ability to survive that trauma. Feelings that culminated in a revealing memoir entitled The Godfather's Daughter.
It wasn't until 7 years after he passed did I publish it in 2012. If I was able to come through a set of circumstances that were unbearable like that, then I can help others heal or empower others to know that they have the ability to do that. And the amount of people that I helped is why I did it.
In the end, Michael Durso's testimony helped convict more than 70 mobsters and associates, including Gigante. For his cooperation, Durso received probation and a $200 fine. Following his testimony, he went into the Federal Witness Protection Program. But even with a new identity in an undisclosed location, the former Mike Durso was not ready to drop his guard. In 2020, Durso wrote an open letter to his former enemies that was published in the New York Post. In the letter, he warned them against seeking retribution. D'Urso threatened in the letter, and I quote, "I am ready, able, and willing to defend my family and myself. A bat and a knife won't help you, so if you come, you better bring a gun." Mike Campy says the mob's own success has also led to its demise.
When you go back to the days, say, the Lucky Luciano, you had Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, Meyer Lansky. You had a bunch of guys that sort of had a bond. When you have a small handful of people working together, I can see a bond. But when you increase it by hundreds and thousands of associates, it's just really dysfunctional and doesn't work the way you think it originally was intended to work.
With every informant and witness they flipped, law enforcement was exposing major fault lines in a historically bulletproof criminal organization.
The joke about the Colombo family that one of the defense lawyers representing somebody in the Colombo family said is that it was called the House of Pancakes. And I was like, why? Because everyone's flipping.
Omerta, the mob's ancient oath of secrecy and loyalty to the family, was quickly becoming a thing of the past, as soldiers and bosses alike struck deals with prosecutors to stay out of prison, deals that involved ratting out their fellow mobsters. Safe to say, it was not always good for their long-term health.
There's one set of people that you can't cross, because as Al Diarco, the acting boss of the Lucchese crime family, told me, there's only one way you leave LCN, and that's feet first. Once you're a member of organized crime, an inducted member, you never leave. And so if you become a cooperator, you're no longer a member of organized crime. You are simply what they consider an outlaw, and you will be dealt with when they get their opportunity.
And for those mobsters who stayed in, the impulse towards self-preservation was sometimes even stronger and deadlier.
A lot of the criminals have either an ego or a sociopathic personality where they're envious of each other, and they, at some point in time, may want to off each other so that they can replace them in positions of powers.
And with so many mob bosses being brought down, the turmoil and violence inside their organizations was often left unchecked. It was trust no one, kill or be killed. For decades, the threat to the mob's survival came from law enforcement. Now, much of it came from within. And nowhere was this more evident than in one of New York's oldest crime families, the Bonannos.
The Bonannos were an absolute mess, to put it bluntly. They had problems going back to the 1960s.
Jack Stubing is a retired supervisory special agent at the FBI, a self-described crime-fighting fanatic who graduated from Hardy Boys books to the Manual of the FBI.
The first actual organized crime book I ever read was Honor Thy Father, written by Gay Talese, and it was about the Bonanno family.
And during his long career, he would have a ringside seat for much of the dysfunction within the once invincible crime family.
The boss, the titular boss, was now living in Arizona, having been chased out of New York. They were rudderless. There were these constant factions within the family.
The Bonannos had been kicked off the commission after the Donnie Brasco debacle, which had allowed the FBI to infiltrate their organization for years.
As a result, nobody trusted the Bonannos in the other four families. They were basically shunned. The Bonannos, in self-defense, because they had a generate income of their own, started exploring other avenues. They were among the pioneers in the boiler rooms and stock frauds and pump and dump schemes on Wall Street. They got more heavily involved in narcotics distribution. They just explored other avenues, and nobody knew anything about them because they were basically operating on their own.
But being kicked off of the commission and left out of the subsequent commission trial proved to be a blessing in disguise. As the other families saw their bosses sent off to prison, much of the Bonanno leadership was left largely intact and out on the street.
As a result of the fallout of the commission case, we, the FBI, started to develop quite a number of turncoat mobsters. Virtually every cooperating witness that I interviewed from other families, because none of the Bonanos had turned, they said, well, I don't know anything about the Bonanos because they didn't have a seat on the commission.
So when Bonanno boss Rusty Rastelli died in prison in 1991, it set the stage for the family's big comeback. He would be succeeded by a ruthless former capo who was determined to consolidate power and rebuild the family. His name was Joe Massino.
He was brutal. He was reputed to do his own work. In other words, he wasn't afraid to use violence as a tool against somebody personally. He wouldn't just order somebody else. He would participate himself if necessary.
You may remember Massino from our first 2 episodes, because it was Massino who helped orchestrate the 1979 hit on rival Carmine Galante, as well as the 3 capos murder.
Massino was basically putting the band back together, for lack of a better term. The other 4 families were now much weaker because of all of these turncoats and prosecutions that were taking place. And so now it was the Bonanos who were filling the power vacuum.
And as the new head of the family, Massino was arguably the most powerful mafia leader in the country, and the only full-fledged New York boss who was not in prison.
He was the force to be reckoned with. He really was de facto the boss of bosses by this point.
To the FBI, Massino would be known as public enemy number 1. To the world, he would be known as the last Don.
Next time on Law & Order, Criminal Justice System.
Traditionally in organized crime, you sort of expect to go to jail. But what you don't expect is when the government takes your money away while you're in jail.
One of the Cosa Nostra rules is if you vouch for a guy and he turns bad, it's on you, and the penalty could be death.
You start out with one individual. He then has so much information. Once he cooperates, you're able to go after 2, 3, 4, and then it was like a domino effect.
Law & Order, Criminal Justice System is a production of Wolf Entertainment and iHeart Podcasts. Our host is Anna Siga Nicolazzi. This episode was written by Walker Lamond and Anna Siga Nicolazzi. Executive produced by Dick Wolf, Elliot Wolf, and Stephen Michael at Wolf Entertainment. On behalf of iHeartRadio, executive produced by Alex Williams and Matt Frederick, with supervising producers Trevor Young and Chandler Mays, and producers Jesse Funk, Noams Griffin, and Rima El-Kayali. This season is executive produced by Anna Siga Nicolazzi. Story producer Walker Lamond. Our researchers are Carolyn Talmadge and Luke Stentz. Editing and sound design by Noams Griffin. Original music by John O'Hara. Original theme by Mike Post. Additional music by Steve Moore. And additional voiceover by me, Steve Zernkilton. Special thanks to Fox 5 in New York, ABC, and CBS for providing archival material for the show. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio and Wolf Entertainment, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. Thanks for listening.